Is this a little bit better? Can we hear me now? That's better? Okay. We have our trusty IT here today, so they're going to make it work for us. I'll start over again. Thank you for your patience. Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Kyle Doyle. I'm the Manager of Asset Management at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. This is a presentation on the capital funding update for the Woodcreek Park Wastewater Service. Today we're being joined by Shane Walkie, who is the Manager of Utility Services, as well as Director McMahon, who is the Area Director for Area E. Going to go over a little bit of housekeeping here. We're using two methods to deliver this today. We're casting over YouTube, and that will be recorded. The link is available on the Woodcreek Wastewater Service webpage. We're also, you're able to join us via Zoom. And if you're here on Zoom, there's a few features you have to engage us during this presentation. So the format for tonight is I will be doing a presentation, and at the end there'll be some questions. During the presentation, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, as some of you have found already, there's a question and answer button, and you can click on there and type in your question, and if it's possible for the other staff other than myself to answer your question, we'll try to. Beyond that, we'll be doing a poll at the end or near the end of the presentation to get a sense of what the residents, what their feelings are, and we'll also allow you at the end to raise your hand and join us via audio or video if you like, and ask a question. Please hold your questions to the end and avoid raising your hand if you can during the presentation because it's a bit distracting. Okay, so I'll get into it here. If I can figure this out. All right. So as I said, this is the summer 2020 capital funding update for the Woodcreek Park Wastewater Treatment Service. The map on the screen in front of you is the area defined by the service. If you're outside that area, tonight's discussion won't really apply to you. And if you have any questions, please keep them to the Woodcreek Wastewater Service. So just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. We're going to do a summary of the previous reviews. I joined you in December and January of last year to talk about our preliminary findings. And we'll talk about a capital funding update that we have to talk about tonight. We'll tell you what's coming up next, and we'll take your questions. So, starting in 2019, we conducted a high-level review of wastewater services within the SCRD. This involved going through each one in detail, and you can find the results of that plan at www.scrd.ca/wastewater. We also prepared asset management plans for each specific service area. These were even more in-depth in detail and allowed us to have all the information we needed to understand the services in one place, and allowed staff and board members and the public to also view that information and understand it as we do. Following that, we engaged the community, which you may have been part of. And we did a series of sessions and got a lot of feedback from residents. We tried to prepare some fact sheets to help present the information we were finding to the residents to help them understand it better. And then we prepared a budget revision based on the feedback we had received and presented to the board, and a rate adjustment was applied where some user fees and frontage fees were adjusted to reflect the budget information we had found. So the key findings from that service review was that the existing revenue for the wastewater services was generally unsustainable. In most services, the operations budget were greater than the revenues generated from user fees, and we found that contributions to reserve funds were deferred frequently to ensure that operations could continue. Future capital expenditures were not planned for. The ratio of capital expenditures was far too low compared to the ratio of capital reserves, or the reverse is true, I should say. Just to recap, previously we collected frontage fees from every parcel in the service area, and user fees were collected from every parcel that was connected to the wastewater service in the service area. These fees combined to form the operating budget, and that operating budget funded the annual operating expenditure and contributed to the capital and operating reserves. The problem with this is it's hard to determine what the actual needs of the funding are because it's confusing where it goes and where it comes from. So some of the key outcomes of that review was that we decoupled the user fee and frontage fees, and this aligns with the SCRD financial policy. For clarity, it allows us to see that user fee revenue only funds operations and maintenance, and that frontage fees only fund capital expenses. Also, through an extensive review of operation and maintenance requirements for every facility, we audited the operations and maintenance activities. We revised the budget to ensure there was adequate funding, and we established reserve targets to ensure that there was minimum reserves available for the work that needed to be done. Now, this process is an annual process, and we will review these numbers and look at it every year to make sure that we're not overshooting or undershooting the needs of this service. Finally, and this is what we'll talk about more tonight, we developed capital funding models to plan for future capital expenses. Then now you can see what the funding model looks like today, and that is user fees fund operations and maintenance budget and contribute to the operations and maintenance reserve, and frontage fees are for capital expenditures and the capital reserve only. A frequent question we got during our engagement sessions was, why do we need an operating reserve? Well, obviously unforeseen repairs can exceed the annual operating budget if something breaks unexpectedly. And when we have operational expenses, we're not able to borrow from them. We can only borrow for capital expenses. So you need to have a minimum amount of money because you need to get the work done. Now, it's important for everyone to remember that operating reserves are withdrawn only for your service area, and they're not used to fund anything else on the Sunshine Coast. From last year, this is the impact on wastewater rates. Your user fee in 2019 was $500 a year, and your frontage fee was $102. And there's been an increase of $54.17 to your user fee. The budget for the operation and maintenance activities increased by 13%, which corresponds pretty much exactly with the user fee increase. So moving forward, we listened to resident feedback in developing our new models. I should say revising our models. We were told we were too conservative and that there was more tolerance for debt than we maybe thought, and that the uncertainty of the upcoming rate increases was causing anxiety among residents. So to address the criticism that we were too conservative, we looked at our numbers and we reduced where possible our engineering allowances by about 3%. We reduced our contingency requirements by 15%. We also considered the tolerance for debt. So many of our models considered financing larger portions of proposals or projects than before. And we've created a 5-year rate structure that we're going to propose to the board. This will be revised annually. The last year of the rate structure ideally would be updated every year, and that gives residents advance notice of upcoming rates. Some other new developments were the introduction of a variable borrowing rate based on the term of the loan. So on top of keeping up to date with the current borrowing rates, we also looked at adjusting the rate based on whether it was a 5, 10, 15, 20-year loan for the infrastructure. We also took another look at the construction cost index we used to estimate the future cost of construction, and we refined it so that it also had a variable rate that was changed over time. That rate is on the screen there for your reference. And again, if you have any desire to see this again, you can see it on YouTube and you can pause it there. So a quick review of some topics we covered in our previous engagement sessions, but just so everyone's on the same page, through provincial legislation, specifically the Local Government Act, it's articulated that local service areas and regional districts can be funded only by the participants of those service areas, And this means that um, there's no one else who can contribute to the reserve funds or to any of the revenues required to fund this service other than the people within the Woodcreek Park wastewater service. And that means the costs are shared by a small number of people, relatively speaking. All infrastructure degrades over time. So as time goes by, we have reduced performance and higher maintenance costs. And as time goes on, it costs more to replace the infrastructure that we built in the past. So the way we came up with our models, just on a broad sense, we developed a timeline of anticipated replacement of infrastructure using generally agreed upon estimated useful lives of infrastructures from engineers or manufacturers. Where possible, we use the most recent replacement cost estimates. And if this meant we had a recent estimate from a plant that was built that was a similar size or situation, we would use that cost to project future costs. And then we inflated it to that future value, the anticipated replacement date, using construction cost indexes built from historical data. The variable rates were based on replacement date, as I said before. So if the replacement is in the near future, it has a different rate than one in the further future. And this reflects basically the risk that you would expect to see in time when you're estimating costs. And we included debt financing costs as well. So if we anticipated borrowing money for a project, we accounted for the cost of borrowing that money. And on the flip side, where we accrued more money than we needed and have capital reserves built up, we applied the annual interest rate we expected to earn on that money. So it is important to recognize that we use the most recent replacement cost estimates. This was an update. As we could, we get more information and we'll update this as we go along. So we can see some variations in our estimates as new projects come online, and we're anticipating in the near future having a good idea of what the range of treatment cost replacement would be. Another thing to consider is that there are three main components in your wastewater service. There's a treatment plant, there's a disposal system, and a collection system, and they all have different lifespans. This kind of dictates the length of time we need to look at when we're making a capital plan, and I'll demonstrate that here as we show you kind of a Goldilocks situation where if we look at the next 30 years of anticipated capital expenditures for Woodcreek Park, we can see that there's a little bit in the near future and then one at the end of a 30-year window. And these are the upcoming sand filter replacement, a drain field, and a treatment plant and a collection system. Now, if we continue on the path that we're on, the historical rate increase for Woodcreek Park has been 22 cents a year on average. Obviously, we haven't done annual increases, but if you pan it out across the whole time SCRD records show, that's the number we get. If we continue on that rate, the reserve balance in gray on the bottom of your screen, you can see how it doesn't really keep up with the cost of the infrastructure we're seeing. And where there's long periods of flat and you're not building a reserve, that indicates probably we've accrued some debt and we're paying it off. Oh, there's that little tag there I put in. What's up next? Okay, so here you see, if we look at 50 years, another object added there at the end, and I've added also to the screen the frontage fee that we'd have to see to account for this reserve levels we're seeing, which are very low. So what you're seeing is a fee increase due to a loan payment in 2040, quite a large spike, and another one in about 2050, where just to keep up with the debt payments, we need to increase the frontage fees. Now, part of SCRD financial policy is to have situations like this not happen. Sudden spikes in frontage fee rates or any sort of revenue rates like this are considered inequitable ways to look at financing for services. And it's not really fair. If you own a home in 2035, you're probably either very concerned for the future or looking to talk to a real estate agent at that point, and that's not fair pressure to put on anyone. So we can back it out even further, and we look at the 75. Oh, this might say 50. This is the 50. Oh, my bad. So this is the 50 years. I apologize. I made a mistake there. I said the last one was 50. It was 30. And we add a few more items on, and we go to 75 years, and there's even more. Now, we're thinking 50 years is probably the right range, because that's the lifespan we expect from a treatment plant, which is the major component in most of these wastewater services. We've got here a model to finance the next 50 years. And in this model, the frontage fees increase from 2020 to 2025 by $200 a year, and then a 2% annual increase beyond that. A 2% increase is considered to be flat rate financing, as it keeps up with the general inflation. The CPI is generally 2%. So this model was one of our original models we presented, or we considered, for Woodcreek Park. We didn't present any of these. In this model, we collect enough reserves to pay for almost everything at 100%, and there's a very healthy reserve balance, so there's no expected spikes in the user and their frontage fee for the next 50 years. Now we're going to look at a model where we reduce the increase period, the $200 a year increase period, by 1 year, and so we max out at $902 in 2024. And increase beyond that at 2%. And this is one that, as you can see from the reserve balance here, considers some debt. And heading into 2070, it's not ideal for a reserve balance, and we anticipate there may be a spike in the frontage fee at that point, but it also will be able to refine our understanding of future costs as we go along. So for the next 50 years, this looks like a pretty healthy plan. Now, obviously, we considered a range of plans, not just the three we're presenting here, but just to give an illustration of what happens if we look at a slower rate of increase. We're looking at $50 a year for 11 years on this next one. So we go from $102 in 2020 to $602 in 2030. And things look fine for the first little bit, but by the time 2049, 2050 rolls around, we have one spike in frontage fees driven by debt, and then another one coming up, and an even greater one near the end of the period. And when you look at the situation you have as a reserve during this plan, once you get past the large amount of debt you take on in 2049, you just never end up recovering your reserve, and you're constantly accruing more and more debt. Now, this doesn't really count as a financially sustainable plan, but I just want to demonstrate, what happens if we delay fee increases and delay accruing capital reserve. As we put it off more, we're forced to borrow more debt, and that makes it impossible to borrow more or to acquire enough reserve to pay for the next item. So on the screen here, I have the three plans I presented as far as frontage fees for the next 50 years. And I also have the historical frontage fee increase that we'd see if we had those debt-driven increases. And you can see within 20 years, the historical frontage fee would be far greater and would always exceed the cost of maintaining the service. What was ostensibly the cheaper option in the early period, by the time 30 years expires, is now the most expensive and continues to be the most expensive. And the other two plans track fairly evenly, with the brown one on the screen there being slightly more affordable for the entire period. Now, just highlighting the plan where we raise the frontage fee by $50 for 11 years and compare that to one where we raise it by $200 for 4. Right around the time we're getting to the second debt-driven increase here, where the red circle is, you're already paying more than if you had taken the other plan. But when you think about the financial situation, if we look at the same period of time here with the reserve balances graphed, you can see that there's just a drastic difference in your financial flexibility as a service. So my point being that a small difference now makes a large difference in the future. So we're proposing a 5-year rate structure, and the idea of that is to create cost certainty. Future rate adjustments would be introduced 5 years in advance, and that would allow residents to financially plan for things, and there would be no unanticipated spikes in the cost to maintain the service. So what I have here on the screen now would be the 3 plans I showed today and the associated 5-year rate structure, including user fee. So plan 1 in the green column on the left-hand side there You see your user fee is your predominant cost for the first couple of years, and then it's more the frontage fee. Plan 2 and Plan 3, or the alternative plan we presented, are there as well. This sort of financial certainty, I think, is one of the huge benefits of these asset management plans. So we're going to have a poll here. We're going to put up a question, and we just want you to let us know which of these three makes the most sense to you. Well, the problem. Give you a few more minutes here to take a thought, and if you want to cast a vote, please do. This is an informal poll, and definitely not guaranteeing that what you vote for is what we'll end up enabling, but this does give staff and the elected officials a good idea of what the sense from the community is. Okay, great. Thank you for your feedback. Much appreciated. So just to talk about some of the upcoming work we have going ahead of us here and the asset management side of things. We're going to continue to finalize the capital funding model. Just make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's before we send it off to the board. Everywhere we can, especially for upcoming work like you have here at Woodcreek, we're going to continue to pursue grant opportunities to offset the cost to the community. We'll present the 5-year rate structure to the board for consideration, and hopefully this provides residents with near-term rate certainty. And then on an ongoing annual basis, we'll be reviewing the operations maintenance budget, and we'll refine the annual projection of maintenance costs and ensure that the appropriate operating reserve is present for any emergencies. So just in conclusion, currently the rates that we have are not financially sustainable. There are many ways to finance 50-year capital expenditures, and an annual review of this work will allow us to stay up to date and provide the best information we can. So that's all we have for today on the presentation side of things. I did want to put this up for a little bit before we'll turn off the PowerPoint completely. But if you have any questions now, feel free to raise your virtual hand and we'll get to you, or you can type them in the Q&A if you prefer to remain voiceless. And at any time, you're welcome to visit the websites on the screen there, or email us at info@scrd.ca. Your message will make its way to me, and we'll try to answer your question or send it to whoever can. Yeah, I can certainly share that the results were split 50-50 between option 2 and the alternative option that we presented there. Now, for the benefit of the people who may not be able to see the questions that are being typed, I will read some of them out, as this is on YouTube as well. One of the questions was, will we get the results of the survey? And the answer was 50-50 between option 2 and the alternative option. On Zoom, we can see that we have 5 residents joining us tonight at this time. Some may have popped in and out. It's hard for me to watch both screens. And another question about why we do not increase user fees. We have increased user fees. We did last year by about 10%. And we will if we need to, but at this time, because we've separated the operations budget from the capital budget, the user fees we're collecting are sufficient to pay for the operations side of the Woodcreek wastewater service. So it's the future upgrades and paying for infrastructure as we have to fix it, not fix, but replace it, that we need to accumulate more capital for. So I hope that answers your questions. So if anyone would like to see the presentation again, you can see it at www.scrd.ca/Woodcreek. And there's a link there to a YouTube video. This is being recorded, and yeah, you'll be able to see it there. As far as a physical copy of the funding models, when we present to the board in the agenda, we'll have all the background information. Okay, I'm here for a few more minutes, but in the next short while, I'll be shutting this down, and you can always get a hold of us on the words on the screen there. So thanks for joining us. It was a great to see everyone virtually. If there's any upcoming information, it will be posted on the website as well. You can follow the social media channels of the SCRD, and there'll be tweets and I imagine Facebook posts anytime we have an update. And if there's a wastewater related item on the agenda, I'll make sure it's posted on both the SCRD website for wastewater and hopefully the Woodcreek one specifically, and as well as we'll put a message out through social media. So thank you again for everyone for joining us. We're going to shut her down here and hope you have a great evening. Thank you.